The origins of the word woke come from AAVE, or African American Vernacular English, and originally meant an awareness to injustice. Before the word woke was used to describe pretty much anyone left of the alt-right, the word SJW was thrown around with the same general undefined meaning that woke is used with today, not by Black Americans, but by people like Ben Shapiro and Jordan Peterson. In this video, I want to talk about the ways that the word has been weaponized against not only the community they stole it from, but LGBT Americans and others as well. Let's get into it. It's hard to pin down one specific way that the alt-right uses the word woke. It can encompass anything from advocating for LGBT rights, challenging capitalism, fights against systematic racism, ethnic and religious diversity, to things that aren't even political, such as veganism, alternative fashion, and gentle parenting. The right often presents this mishmash of ideas as the quote-unquote war on woke, creating an us versus them mentality among conservatives who use it to label anyone different from themselves, even those who aren't terribly far off from their own values, as woke or infected by the woke mind virus. Even some people who may have been more moderate or traditional Republicans have been pushed by this culture war ideology to brand those who vary from them politically as woke, turning it from a term to describe awareness of injustice that was notably used among a marginalized community to a broad stroke insult to describe people who are supposedly indoctrinated by the left. A major way this quote-unquote war on wokeness is being fought is among the American public school systems. Right-wing advocates for these ideas posit that public school systems are indoctrinating children to not only become left-wing, but to turn them gay or trans. This quote-unquote war has manifested in a myriad of ways, with Florida implementing book bans that force teachers to remove all books from shelves in libraries until they're approved by a school district official who holds a quote-unquote educational media specialist certificate. As a result of this, Florida has approved the removal of books that contain quote-unquote sexually explicit content. However, this has been applied to books with simply LGBT representation, deeming them explicit. Not only has this extended to LGBT-related books, but things ranging from encyclopedias, the autobiography of Malcolm X, the Diary of Anne Frank, The Handmaid's Tale, 2001: A Space Odyssey, and many other pieces of classic or educational literature. It has also been used to fight for companies like PragerU, an online alt-right think tank that is not a university, to be approved for use in school curriculum in states such as Florida, Oklahoma, Arizona, and New Hampshire. While PragerU creates content specifically tailored to educators, their YouTube and website content ranges from moderately biased history education to racism and alt-right extremism, and features well-known people such as Ben Shapiro. While conservatives argue that the left is indoctrinating children through means such as allowing LGBT content in libraries or supposedly teaching critical race theory, they actively insert politically motivated content into laws and education of children ranging from elementary age to seniors in high school. In this way, what the wokeness is the acceptance of LGBT students and fear of teaching history that may place America in a less than positive light. A major value among conservatives is that of patriotism, which often extends beyond that into nationalism. Much of American history, at least of my experience in Texas, is taught through a lens that refuses to ever acknowledge Americans nor the colonists as anything but objectively correct. Many American history teachers present watered down or downright absent pictures of chattel slavery, indigenous genocide, and even the Confederates in the Civil War. These topics are often explained by adult leftists, or people such as myself as an indigenous person who have personal ties, to only ever have been fully understood and taught in adulthood, as government-funded public schools present a picture of our country that allows for the undermining of how these events affect Americans who still live here today, and downplay the atrocities committed throughout our history. That being said, while these things supposedly being taught to American children are not only not being taught, but being taught through a nationalistic and warped lens, no leftist is advocating for showing elementary school-age children brutal imagery or descriptions of slavery or indigenous genocide, but rather for age-appropriate understandings of these events and to understand not only their impact on citizens today, but the contributions and histories of the groups who experienced them. While I don't believe all people who spew this narrative are consciously attempting to be racist or actively thinking about the implications of their supposed fight, attempting to not only ignore the contributions of Black and Indigenous Americans, but their histories, presents a white nationalist perspective on American history. America is great, so how could America be racist? Instead of working to fix the systematic racism, it's brushed under the rug as though it never and is not happening. Doing this allows conservatives to achieve the main goal of conservatism, to keep the status quo, maintain things as they are. And that includes maintaining an either indifference or active approval of the injustice experienced by POC Americans. To acknowledge that bad things are happening and to teach the history behind them leads to a natural desire for change, and change goes in direct opposition to their political ideology. While it could be argued the fact that teaching these things could possibly result in more left-leaning students, that argument would neglect the fact that the supposed shift would be as a result of receiving accurate history education, and not due to inserting actual political opinions about the appropriate reaction to these events, as opposed to content like PragerU that presents a purposefully and self-admitted political agenda. This makes it almost ironic that the anti-woke crowd chooses to present the left as politically biased educators for teaching unbiased and non-nationalistic history education, while they advocate for explicitly political content to be taught in schools. While the idea of wokeness can be used to demonize the history and contributions of Black and Native Americans, it's also used to attack LGBT rights as well. Pro-LGBT arguments from left or even center politicians and individuals are often shut down immediately with this language and thought process, often without further explanation. Not only does the alt-right attempt to sanitize American history through erasing Black history, but they also attempt to not only remove LGBT history, something that's not even taught in most schools anyway, but remove any and all support systems from LGBT students. Many states and individual schools have implemented policies that force faculty to tell parents when a student chooses to go by a new name or pronouns, essentially forcing them to be outed. This can obviously be dangerous for students who live in unsupportive homes, and even for those who don't, it removes the autonomy from students to make that choice on their own time. I myself was outed by a friend's parent in middle school, and while my parents are supportive, it was still a traumatic experience and something that I'll never be able to get back. It also extends beyond outing students, however, as some schools require teachers and other staff to use the gender and name that was given to the student at birth, as well as preventing them from using the restroom of their gender identity and barring them from school sports, as well as obviously, like mentioned before, removing books and media with LGBT representation. The argument surrounding LGBT topics often comes back to what many call parents' choice, believing that parents should have a choice in if their child is exposed to LGBT content, as well as believing that they have a right to know if their student has come out to friends or teachers at school. This idea of parents' choice is also used to advocate for vouchers, which are essentially a concept where parents receive money in the form of the tax dollars their students would have otherwise used in public schools to either send them to private schools or provide homeschooling. While I'm not against private schools or homeschooling, I myself went to a private school in high school as well as 1 year of homeschooling, this in practice is not done for any of the reasons that I or many others were homeschooled, that being a toxic environment as an LGBT person and my physical and mental health declining in the case of homeschooling, but to send children to religious schools that are exempt from laws that require certain curriculum to be taught. This curriculum has been cited as anything from teaching evolution, sex ed, LGBT acceptance, to inclusive and accurate history education. A big issue here is the separation of church and state. By doing this, the government is funding these religious private schools, which goes against the First Amendment, as well as removing that funding and attendance to public schools, dropping the already very minimal funding they receive. These parents often talk about their children as though they're their property, disregarding how their child may feel about these topics or their desire of what type of school to attend, as well as disregarding the autonomy and privacy of LGBT children. I hate that I have to say this, but children are not property. They are people. They are individuals. Even in schools without these policies surrounding LGBT students and content, many schools are still hostile environments to queer kids and teenagers as a result of the rhetoric spread by this community, something that I can personally attest to as I was in public school before anyone even said SJW, let alone woke, and had to move schools as a result of that toxic environment. While the phrase woke is most commonly bastardized when referring to LGBT and racial issues, it's also, like I said, used towards non-political movements and ideas as well. It's not uncommon to find completely non-preachy vegan cooking videos and find people calling the creator woke simply over cooking food. While veganism can be political, I've personally seen this sentiment under a video of both German and Japanese creators, who are not even a part of our political system, simply for showing recipes or animal product substitutions. It's also common to see this in regards to gentle parenting, a style of parenting more common among millennial and older Gen Z parents, which basically amounts to respecting your child as their own person and avoiding things such as spanking or phrasing like, because I said so, and instead explaining to your child what they did wrong and helping them work through it. This has been exemplified through the conservative ripoff of Bluey, an Australian children's show that displays gentle parenting, with the show Chipchilla, created by conservative media outlet The Daily Wire in an attempt to quote-unquote challenge the left. While it may seem odd for conservatives to be ticked off by a show as innocent and apolitical as Bluey, with most episodes focusing on the main characters playing pretend in some capacity and having supportive parents, this seems to loop back around to the idea of children being property. Much of the alt-right views children not only as the property of their parents, but as a means to further their agenda. This culminates in a massive ways, one of the more niche examples being the Quiverful movement, in which evangelical parents essentially attempt to outbreed other groups by having and subsequently indoctrinating as many children as possible. It's seen through the way that they attack schools for the things I discussed before, as well as arguments that America is a Christian nation, and as such religious iconography, ideas, and beliefs must be taught in public schools. And it's also seen in many of the parenting styles conservatives advocate for, with popular books like To Train Up a Child essentially teaching you how to beat obedience into your children. Younger generations have always been a conduit for change, even the baby boomers in their own youths, with anti-war advocacy being a major part of their own childhoods and teen years. Conservatives want things to stay the same. They reject change by the nature of their own ideology, and this culminates in not only their parenting styles with phrases like, "I was spanked and I turned out fine," and advocating for punishment over explanation, because that's what they personally experienced, and to change that would be, well, change, but also attempting to force, indoctrinate, and scare their children into becoming adults who vote in the same direction as their parents. Ultimately, the word woke has essentially lost any and all meaning. It's only used to rally conservatives against an other. While more moderate Republicans and centrists sometimes use the word, I believe part of the reason it's so much more common among the alt-right, and can be used to create more of the alt-right, is because it encompasses the greatest and most fundamental fear that they share, the fear of change. Even when that change is apolitical, like in cases such as Bluey and Gentle Parenting, they have been so deeply radicalized that the fear has extended beyond just politics, but makes them see any change as a slippery slope to downright destruction of their religious and political ideologies. It creates an other out of anyone they deem as a threat. It utilizes the idea of us versus them into an even stronger weapon against change and anyone that they deem to be an advocate for it. Woke is not a type of belief system, nor is it what it originally meant. It's a weapon used to create a cult-like group. It's the same thing as Jehovah's Witnesses using the word apostate to create fear and anger towards those who have left or criticized their ideas. It's what Scientologists call a suppressive person, someone who left and as such poses a threat to their beliefs. These things are not strictly defined. They're only used to heighten fear. And when people are scared and angry, they often act in bigger and more dramatic ways to dismantle whatever the threat may be. While these people may be loud and violent, they are ultimately still a minority, and working to stand up for the rights of others, even if you may not belong to that group, or taking the risks to fight for your own communities, is the only way we can protect those hurt by reactionary ideas. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Hade.
I stare at the populace in prayer.